Hello and good evening. Welcome to Thunderdome Metal Reviews. I am Gabe Cooper, and I'm here with my friends Ben, David, and Tracy. How are y'all doing tonight?
Living life, living large, getting ready to be sad.
Awesome.
Trying to figure out the existential questions of life, such as what is this album cover and whether or not Tracy is rapping.
Tracy's going to rap over whether or not we figure it out.
It looks like an X-ray of an angel.
Yes.
That's all I know.
Could be. Well, I'm glad to hear
getting ready to curb stomp at some poor soul on the ground, which
some poor sinner who's going to hell. That's what it is.
Sounds about right. So we're reviewing a record called The Dreadful Hours by My Dying Bride.
Yes, we are. It was released on November 13th of 2001. It is their 7th studio album. It was released on Peaceville Records. It has a runtime of 1 hour, 10 minutes, and 51 seconds. The producer's chair is Mags and Andrew Crahan. You have Aaron Stainthorpe on vocals, Andrew Crahan on guitars, Hamish Glencross on guitars, Adrian Jackson on bass, Sean Taylor Steele on drums. You have additional personnel with Johnny Maudling on keyboards and Yasmin Ahmed keyboards on A Cruel Taste of Winter. So
why'd you do this to us, Gabe?
I was asking myself the same thing. I discovered this band when I was going in search of the roots of Death Doom, and I listened to the first two records that they made, called As the Flower Withers and Turn Loose the Swans, and they impressed me a lot, and I decided to choose another one of their records and put it on this week.
And there's another one coming up too, right? That Ben picked. Am I making that up? Isn't there another My Dying Bride?
Yeah, he chose Turn Loose the Swans. So if anybody out there is already a My Dying Bride fan, tune in then.
Yeah, that was the first one of their albums that I'd listened to, so I decided to put this on here. And I got that back in the day in a very similar Nevermore situation, to those who listened to that review.
For future reference, it is currently scheduled to come out on May 26th, that review. So we're a good couple months away from it. If the schedule stays the same, we'll see. Subject to change.
Always subject to change. I'd only heard Ghosts of Orion on Ben's recommendation because Ben, and I guess maybe Tracy too, but certainly Ben was raving about it. So I listened to it for our 2020, again, the roundup of 2020 albums. I did not ended up ranking it as highly as either of you did.
It was my album of the year that year.
I know it was. And
it was my number 3.
I know. You two fucking loved it. And I liked it okay. I just, it was, I wish it were faster. You know how I am. I thought this was going to be like that. And I'm not really sure it was.
Well, this was definitely faster than that.
It was faster. I don't think it's nowhere near polished.
It's all relative, man. I mean, like...
Well, also you got to think though, Ghost of Orion being faster, Ghost of Orion is not a very high bar to reach.
Yeah, no, that's yeah. So
I was gonna say
tortoise on a razor, but it's it's very interesting, and it's been a long time since I've listened to Turn Loose the Swan, so we'll probably revisit this conversation on that review. But this was a lot more death metal-y than I remembered.
And yet not enough.
So I was expecting Ghost of Orion when we started this, and I have to say, I think like the first track kind of hits that, but much after that, it doesn't really kind of play in that vein. This album reminds me a lot, and Ben will know what I'm talking about, when we did Oceans, the Code, and I can't remember the second half of that title, but we did them early 2020, I think, before David joined on, when we first did our album picks of the new albums for the month. This album reminds me a bit since I'm listening to them backwards in time, reminds me a bit of like their vocal stylings, and a bit like there's like a hat dash of that in this album, if that makes sense, considering it comes out after this one.
Ocean's the Sun and the Code. I can kind of see that, although I think that is Ocean's the Sun and the Code was much more polished than this.
Oh,
This
it
is
definitely was, but
this is emotionally raw in a way that was not.
correct. And I think this came out 2001. So
Yeah,
this
it's
is also
2001.
they're
Like
contemporaries with
19 years before.
Yeah, they're also contemporaries like the early In Flames, which that reminds me. This album reminds me a bit of there. If you were to remove the mellow death from In Flames, what would you get?
So David, at lunch you said something that if you like wanted to listen to
Joy Division.
yeah, Joy Division, thank you. That you would just listen to Joy Division.
That is
And
what I
as somebody
said.
who likes Joy Division, can you tell us where you're coming from with that statement?
Well, I like Joy Division, and this is a bit of a broke-ass version of that, slightly, with some death metal added. I don't know. This is a tough sell for me. It's a slog. I'm like tempo challenged if it is fast enough, and there were parts where it really slid into sounding a lot like Joy Division. I'd be like, huh, but then I just wanted to listen to Joy Division. Don't hate me, Gabe.
It's an interesting comparison. I don't begrudge you your opinion. I think it's makes sense, but I feel like most of the time Joy Division doesn't get this slow too, so it's easy to see why you would prefer that.
Exactly.
Nor this heavy, but you're right, not this
Right.
slow.
Yeah. It's interesting. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the slow parts, it was very slow overall, and the sort of emo-y parts weren't quite emo-y enough. The death metal parts weren't quite death enough. That's all. That's my song.
I don't have probably as great insight into this band as Ben does, just because he has spent more time with them, and Tracy as well, probably too. But the earlier albums to me seem to be more doom death, right? And less of this very emotionally raw stuff. This record, I mean, it basically just slowly pours acid all over you and watches you drown in it. It's
Yes, it does that.
It was really, really difficult for me the first time around. And I can't imagine that I'm alone in that experience. Even though I liked the first two ones. So it's also interesting that Ben found this more death than he was expecting.
Well,
to be fair,
it's been a long time since I've listened to that album, like I said.
Right.
So I do think it's they're doing the turn from doom to goth here in a lot of ways, and it's imperfect because they haven't quite figured it out yet. Which by the time 13 albums or something like that later on the Ghost of Orion, they have really nailed in that gothicness. But I'm here for the experimentation, even though it's hard to remember that this is experimentation because this is such an old album in comparison to the rest of their discography anyway. So yeah, it's too long, so take a drink. I will definitely say that. But I like the fact that you have found the divergence point for this band where they start to incorporate the things that they will become, kind of getting away from the doom death and going into a more goth death thing.
Yeah, and I appreciate that as well. Like when I think about it, reminds me of the puppy with big feet analogy that Ben's made in the past. It's like they kind of know where they want their end product to be, but they're not quite for sure on how to meet that yet. And this is only my second time hearing an album by them, So like I went from Ghost of Orion to here. So
Same.
So it was very much like, oh, this is. I kind of see how they get to Ghost of Orion from this album, but it's also very much different than Ghost of Orion is itself. They were. I'm coming with a bunch of like comparisons to them, but that's where my mind's going. Like, all right, I see this here and this here, but they're also reminding me a bit of like Opeth when they first started making that turn from their very death sound to their more prog sound, and it seems like before they really kind of nailed that down. It reminds me of that as well.
My comparison would be similar to Paradise Lost, if only because we did so many Paradise Lost albums and we saw the various stages of mutations that they went through. I bet if we did a deeper dive into My Dying Bride's discography, we would find similar things. And maybe it's just because both of these are British bands that I put the two together.
I think there's an overlap in terms of mood and vibe and level of sadness.
Man, I'm glad you brought that up because there is some lyrically, conceptually intense songs on this album. Like one where there's a father that hates his son and beats him to death. I mean, my God.
Like that. Yeah, this was a rough album. Especially this week. I was listening because I'm in the middle of my coworkers and my students all having nervous breakdowns in front of me. So this and Nevermore in the same week was a vibe, a whole ass vibe of sad.
That's the most emotionally charging week.
I mean, I at least had Sepultura going on. But you know what's bad when
go ahead.
I was simply gonna say, it's bad when Dead Embryonic Cells is like your pick me up, right? Like when that's you're like, what I need is some lighthearted whimsy about being a dead fetus. I don't know. It's that bad, y'all. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah.
This we still went to our body counts to pick me up. Just a body count September were David's workout albums for the week.
That's accurate. 100% correct.
Dreaming Neon Black and The Dreadful Hours were David's office hours.
Yes, that is literally what happened. In the morning, I would listen to Sepultura and Body Count, and then it was just this and that looped at work, and it was grim as fuck.
Maybe you brought about all the issues at work because I came in and heard this and immediately it just came out.
I think I created a darkness, like wormhole or whatever, and it all got very sad.
They look at your room down the hall and it just looks like it's darker than everywhere else.
I just hear all this, like, first it's death, but then suddenly it's it's this album. This album caused the mental health crisis in the United States. Way to go,
Gabe. Oh man, it's all my fault. I mean, I almost feel bad about picking it for this week, but then no, I don't. I actually don't feel bad about it.
No. Don't feel bad about it. Embrace it.
I made you listen to what did he say? What did Ben say? A fourth tier new metal band last week? So.
Yeah, that's true. I forgot about that.
It was third tier, but yeah.
Third tier. I thought tertiary new metal band. I was like, damn, F holster. May not be given Fs, but he's implying Fs emotionally.
Emotionally. The emotional F is worse than the physical F sometimes.
Yeah.
Always.
Do we have any songs we want to talk about off this album?
Yeah, which songs broke you? Let's talk about those.
All of them.
I was going to say The Dreadful Hours is a strong out of the gate break you song.
It is. Oof, y'all. I knew it was bad. I mean, that's when the acid started falling, as you say, Gabe. I'm like, This is going to be, oh God.
Indeed.
I guess I'll go ahead. Go ahead, Gabe.
I was just gonna say, this is kind of like an all and none kind of thing because, it's just the whole thing is just devastating, and if I had to pick like a favorite run, I think it would be the first four. It's just totally, beat your head in, kind of brutal, and then the last two. So. I don't even know what that means, but it's just that's what it is.
I kind of feel the same way about it in that I mean, there are some songs that I marginally like better than the others, but there's nothing that I would pull off for a playlist. This album is too long, but I really feel like you need to listen to all of it as a piece if you're going to subject yourself to it.
Yeah, I'm gonna definitely agree there with Vin on the. It does kind of start to drag there, especially with looking at Wikipedia. The Return to the Beautiful is like a 5-part song. Like it has different parts sectioned off in it, like in the track listing, which I didn't copy over on here because I'm lazy. But it's definitely an all or nothing kind of deal. Nothing will really work unless you just have a sad and depressing playlist that you want to listen to on occasion. Then yeah, pull tracks off it. But if you're just pulling off in your overall playlist, there's not much you can pull off here.
Yeah, which I just need
Thematically.
My Hope the Destroyer on my morning pick me up playlist.
Yeah. I will say I think the first 3 tracks are better songs than the rest are the 3 better songs in my opinion on the album.
I couldn't tell if I just liked the ones at the beginning more or just the sadness overwhelmed me. I don't know. It is sort of a total package kind of deal, and it was a lot to swallow right now. Yet, obviously very appropriate. I mean, it wasn't like off-brand, Gabe. It was very much of this moment. Sometimes I want to deny this moment by pretending I'm a dead embryonic cell. I don't know. I got nothing. There's no refuge on Thunderdome Metal Reviews. It's all bad.
It is much like
There's
the deepest of all the hearts.
There's nowhere
to nowhere to hide.
Well, I guess that means we need to grade this thing. Gabriel?
So I'm kind of in a tough spot with this. On the one hand, like the first time I listened to this, I really didn't want to listen to it ever again. And, it's not because I didn't think that the writing was good or that the music didn't appeal to me, but it's just so depressing. And at the same time, I don't like it nearly as much as say As the Flower Withers, which is kind of on brand for me because it's more doom death than it is just like, I don't know, the downward spiral times infinity. So I think this is an excellent album. I may regret giving it that grade down the road, but I think that that says about where it is in terms of what I think of their catalog so far.
I'm going to give this a C+ only for hardcore fans. I think fans of this genre and band need to check it out. Just kind of have the issue with it, but I think only the hardcore fans are going to really enjoy it and like coming back to it.
This album hurt me emotionally, physically, financially, psychically. I don't know. I see what they were trying to do. I'm not even going to say it was ineffective. I guess it worked, but I'm just going to give it a C. Don't hate me. That's where I'm at.
I am going to come in with Gabe and give this a B+. I don't know that everything on here worked. And again, I think it's too long, but I applaud the effort to try and move beyond mere doom death and bring in gothic elements. Is it a hard album to listen to? On the first spin through, yes, I do think I might have a higher tolerance for this genre than the rest of you do. But I know that they get better, and I would prefer to listen to some of those other albums where it is a more fully formed project or vision. But the playing on this is solid. The lyric writing carries the emotionally devastating message that they wanted it to. So I have to give them credit for that and give them a B+.
That gives us a Thunderdome average of an 82. Now, the important question, gentlemen, would you buy this album?
Nope.
I would not buy it as well.
Probably. I would probably
I
buy
think
this.
I think I would have to say I would buy it if I were planning to listen to it again. You know what I mean? Like, if I had a set plan to like actually listen to it again, I would buy it.
You'd have to just prepare right in advance, like
Yeah, you just gotta
someone
pop like
call.
7 pills and like, yeah.
You just do a cleanse after this with like, I don't know, ABBA or something. I don't know what the opposite would be.
No, seriously, I almost like, when I was, listening to stuff for this week, I almost accidentally listened to like pop music a couple of times.
Almost
Like,
accidentally to
yeah,
boost your mood.
meaning I actually did listen to those things instead of listening to that, because I was just like, okay, I can't do this now, um shit's real.
Yeah.
Very real.
It was very
It
real.
is. It is. And I have some probably unfortunate news for everybody involved in the podcast. It does not approve with our next album that we're doing, because we are looking at Crowbar's new album, Zero and Below,
Yes.
for Ben's pick of March.
Yeah, but
Hey.
Crowbar rocks.
The beatings will continue.
Exactly.
Morale improves. I don't often talk about music in these terms. It's something that I hear Henry Rollins talk about on his radio show that he does on KCRW out of Los Angeles, I believe. But this album in particular, not the Crowbar one, because I haven't listened to all of it yet. I've just listened to 3 very depressing tracks, which I loved. But this is an album that is seasonal, meaning that I would want to listen, if I was going to listen to this My Dying Bride again, I would listen to it in the late fall, early winter, not in the emergent spring that we are theoretically in now.
Theoretically.
Just when everything's dying,
Well,
So-
it's very fitting.
I suppose so.
But yes, I'm very much looking forward to Crowbar, since that is my pick, and I am also a Sledgehead. So I will say to the other 3 of you, I love you, and I'm sorry, but not really sorry.
I'm looking forward to it too.
It should be good. At least we get, and recording wise, we got a couple of week break in between. But for our listeners, it's going to be right after the other.
You will get no break, listeners, and you will like it.
Yeah, exactly. Tune in for the blast and the grab bags in between to kind of maybe bring some uplifting stuff.
I mean, we just talked about it. There's nowhere to hide on Thunderdome Metal Reviews. Like, it's just unrelenting.
Well, thank you for
Thank you
listening,
for
and we will
tuning in
continue.
this time.
Yes. Hopefully we didn't chase you away with this album.
Hopefully not.
And that is when our subscribers were cut by 2/3.
So we're down to 5.
You're down to 5, all Estonian. Thanks to the Baltic.